The wind threaded through the broken towers of Winterfell with a restless hum, like a great beast nosing at old stones for forgotten scents. Bran Stark listened to it from the highest balcony of the solar that once belonged to his father, though the boy who had claimed Ned Stark's knee was now far behind him, buried beneath centuries and green-tinged dreams. He breathed the cold, tasting iron on the air. Snowflakes drifted spirally past the latticed windows, catching light from the braziers and flaring gold before melting to nothing against the floor. He was 17 years old in the reckoning of men, but time no longer fitted Bran as snugly as Maester Luwin's woolen cloaks had in childhood. Today he felt older than the heart tree itself. He pressed his fingers to the rough grain of the balcony rail, and the world beneath his skin answered with a tremor, a ripple through roots and rivers and distant voices. The faces of the weirwoods, carved by forgotten hands, seemed to watch him even when he stood among mortal stone. Yet there was loneliness too, the hush that follows the last birdsong at dusk. Mira had gone south with Jojen's ashes, returned to Greywater to bury her grief among the reeds. Hodor's great heart lay still beneath the snows beyond the wall. Summer, yellow-eyed and bound to him by a cord deeper than words, padded silent as moonlight somewhere on the battlements. But even a dire wolf's presence could not fill the empty corridors of his memory. He was king in the realm of roots and sap, yet a boy alone in the quiet of a broken keep. Somewhere below, metal clanged. The remaining blacksmiths reforged links for the rebuilt drawbridge. Winterfell lived again in slow beats, as if resurrection required hesitation. Bran closed his eyes and allowed the wind to bear him beyond the smell of burning pitch and pale stone dust. He felt for the red maze of the heart tree, for the pulse of green singing that lay beneath every leaf. There, that cord, taut and trembling. He tugged gently, a harpist coaxing first sound from silence, and the world folded inward. Darkness descended, but it was the darkness behind closed eyelids, alive with color. He drifted through the great roots of the heart tree, spiraling downward, until earth became sky and sky became water, reflections merging without seam. Then further back, slipping along rings of time that shivered like frost on pond ice. Moments unfurled, his father at the window, younger, hair black as crowfeather, whispering a name. Lyanna, into evening, Robb laughing in the godswood, sword in hand. Sansa braiding Arya's hair while Arya scowled and whined, his mother's voice calling, always calling, as if by naming him she could snare into the present. Bran passed them by, aching, knowing each memory was a door he could never again truly open. He sailed deeper into the well. A bitter heat lapped at the cool green stream, startling him. Fire in the cloth of ears. He followed it, threads of scarlet curling around his senses like smoke through rafters. Heat resolved into a flicker of iridescent emerald. Wildfire. Even before he saw the halls, he recalled their shape from Maester Samwell's letters. The Red Keep, forged by dragons, perched above the skulls of dragons, and within its maze of chambers, a throne wrought from 1,000 blades. But here the throne was empty, and a different seat commanded the flow, a narrow chair of blackwood beside the great brazier in the king's solar. And in it, a man with silver hair caught unkempt about his shoulders, his hands raw with scratches, nails cracked. Aerys Targaryen. Bran lingered unseen, the weirwood's far-gazing eye pressed against a vision of 30 years past. The Mad King, before the madness had sealed him? Perhaps during the first fissures. Aerys' lips moved, yet no sound reached Bran in this ghost hall. Still Bran felt vibration, faint as the thrum inside a shell. Whispered names, a roll of sentences, half remembered. He recognized none. The king's gaze darted to the door, then the hearth, then the blank wall, chasing the murmur as if mice skittered just out of sight. His fingers worked at invisible knots on the armrest. Occasionally he flinched, head jerking at some phantom sting. The man was younger than the gaunt, wild-haired specter Jaime Lannister would one day kill, but the seeds of torment already bloomed in his eyes. And there, shadow among shadows, Bran sensed another presence. Not a person, not a memory, but a pulse of thought that did not belong to Aerys. It spread like a low drone in a cathedral, emanating from the black stone beneath the room, from caverns carved by Valyrians who had bound fire to their will. The hum touched Bran's mind and recoiled, as though recognizing a kinship. Power, cold and old. In that instant, Bran understood the whispers were real, or real enough. An ancient resonance rising from dragonfire and human fear, seeping upward to fill the fragile flesh of a king who did not understand what tether he had stumbled upon. He reeled away, heart thudding. The vision thinned to gray mist, then snapped back to the godswood. His knees buckled. He clutched the trunk, breath ragged. Snow pecked his lashes, melting hot on his cheeks. He had not realized he was weeping. "What did you see?" The voice drifted from memory. But no, it was real, soft as new snow. Summer brushed against his hip. The direwolf's breaths clouded and vanished in the air between them. In the weirwood's reflection, Bran felt the wolf's unease, tasted the copper tang of fear. Summer too had sensed the wrongness. "A dragon's ghost," Bran whispered, "or the echo of one, and a man burning from the inside, though there was no flame on his skin." The wolf whined low. Bran knelt, burying his fingers in rough fur. "Not now," he soothed, though whether he spoke to Summer or himself he did not know. A wind shift rattled the branches and sent a hush skittering across the snow. Bran straightened, wiping his face. He wanted the heat and clamor of the great hall. Wanted 2 cups of hot wine and Podrick's awkward laughter and the sound of Rickon's toy soldiers clattering. But Rickon was gone, and Podrick marched with Sansa's banners in the Vale, and hot wine would muffle the sight rather than sharpen it. He turned instead for the library. Torchlight crackled across rows of half-mended shelves. Ravens nested among the rafters where the roof still gaped. Bran guided himself by the faint singing of memory, here a ledger of Winterfell's tolls, there a crumbling annals of the first men. He passed them, and found a slim volume bound in cracked red leather. A maester's dissertation on Targaryen lineages. He laid it on a table near the hearth and prized it open with care. The pages smelled of dust and peppered mildew. Aerys II Targaryen, crowned in 262 AC. Wed to his sister Rhaella. Issue 3 surviving children. Rhaegar, Viserys, Daenerys. Aerys' early reign promising, marked by canal repairs and fresh dikes along the Mander. Then, after Duskendale, suspicion, purge, wildfire caches, listing pyromancers in the Tower of the Hand. Royal progress is curtailed. No servants allowed blades near the king. Grand Maester Pycelle's testimony sealed under oath. All known. Names he had glimpsed in the vision coiled between the lines. Rossart, Bellis, Garrigus. The pyromancers whispered of names true flame remembered. Bran traced the columns until his fingertips smudged the ink. How easily history faltered because one mind frayed. Could that fraying be mended? Hodor's death weighed like chain on his thoughts. He had already bent one life across time. To bend another. This time a king. This time the fate of thousands. Felt like prying open a wound to stitch a different one closed. Yet Bran had tasted the hum beneath Aerys' madness. It was a spider web of power, and he now sensed its anchor in the cavernous chambers where wildfire slept and dragons once roared. If he could thread his voice between those strands, braid them back into the silence of ancient stone. He rose too swiftly, dizziness lancing his skull. Candles blurred. He steadied himself on the table, breathing slow. He must seek counsel, but who still lived that could counsel a Greenseer? Bloodraven's shade lingered, yes, but it spoke now in riddles more than words. Samwell Tarly wrote from Old Town, but ravens traveled slow, and the answer he needed lay in the rush of sap, not ink. Summer shifted behind him. Hackles raised. A door groaned open. Hushed footsteps, muffled by furs. Bran looked up to see Jon, the king in the north. Though Jon claimed no crown these days, stooped under the arch, snow clinging to dark curls. He had come quietly, as he always did when he sensed Bran had been too long in the trees. His eyes, gray and steady, flicked to the book, then to Bran's face. "Bad dreams?" Jon asked, voice low enough not to disturb the ravens. "Not dreams," Bran answered, closing the cover. "Ghosts." Jon managed a wan smile. "I know something of those." Bran gestured to the empty chair across the table. Jon sat, unbuckling his cloak. The fire popped, showering sparks that drifted like tiny rubies before fading. "I saw a king," Bran began. "The one called Madit Guy. But what I felt, it wasn't only his mind unraveling. There was something beneath, like a song in a language no man speaks." "There's a sigh." Jon's brow furrowed. "You think someone, or something, drove him to it?" "Perhaps." Bran's voice trembled. "If it can be answered, I must try." Jon clasped his gloved hands. "Can you change it without breaking us?" It was not judgment. It was worry, plain as the scar on Jon's cheek. He remembered the cave beneath the wall where Bran had told him of Hodor. How Jon's face tightened when he realized the cost. "I don't know," Bran whispered. "But if a king's madness can be unmade, imagine how many lives." Jon lifted a hand, stopping him. "Lives, yes, but a spark catches quick. Aerys lived, burned King's Landing perhaps not, but then Robert's rebellion. Maybe it never ends, or ends differently." He shook his head. "I am not saying don't try. I am asking you not to hurry." Bran exhaled, tension easing. "Then watch me. Pull me back if I fall." Jon's mouth quirked, like pulling summer back by the tail. "Exactly." Bran allowed a thin smile. They sat in companionable silence a while, the only sound the crackling hearth and the bump of wind against shutters. When Jon finally left, taking the torch with him, Bran lingered until shadow swelled in the corners. Only then did he carry the book back to its shelf and weave through the aisles toward the godswood. The night sky lay deep and pricked with frost-bright stars. A tapestry Bran felt he might peel back to step behind if he wished. Summer moved ahead, paws silent, tail slashing arcs of shadow. They crossed the courtyard where the wet stone gleamed. At the gate of the godswood, the direwolf stopped, sniffing. The weirwood's face was pale as bone, blood-red sap frozen in old tears. Bran knelt on the roots and shut his eyes. This time the fall came swifter. He slipped past years like pages of a scroll, each marked by the North's unending seasons. Back, always back, until the memory of snow gave way to the press of southern heat. He found himself again within the king's solar, though perhaps a day or a moon before the last vision. Aerys sat at a long table strewn with parchments. His hair gleamed, freshly washed, and his robes bore the red of Targaryen rather than the ash-smudged gray from before. In the hearth, wood snapped and sighed. Aerys scribbled, muttering. From the hall beyond came faint laughter. Young Rhaegar's perhaps, yet Aerys stiffened as though each laugh was a knife. Bran hovered, a mote of thought beneath the ceiling. He traced the tune rising from the stone, that dread hum. It coursed between mortar joints, through iron hinges, under flagstones worn by dragon-forged boots. He followed the current down flights of stairs into the belly of the castle. Torches guttered, signaling his passage, though no physical wind stirred. At last, he reached a vault whose doors were banded in black iron. He slipped through as easily as steam. Inside waited emerald gloom. Hundreds of clay pots lay stacked in pyramids, each stamped with a crowned skull. Wildfire. Yet it was not the jars that sang. The song rose from fissures in the bedrock, exhalations of something ancient and restless. Valyria's ghosts. Bran's skin, if one could call such presence skin, shivered. He sensed then a second pulse, resonant but colder, damp like roots after rain. The weirwood, distant but aware. It tugged at him, offering anchor. Bran latched on, steadied his mind, and pushed thought outward in a single wordless note. Calm? The hum stuttered. Banished? No, merely surprised. It gathered again, swirling like glowing ash, seeking new flesh to infiltrate. Bran's thought wove around it, braiding. He remembered how Mira had taught him to bind reeds into small boats for the river. He wrapped the resonance much the same. Gently, so gently, whispering quiet through the threads of creation. In that hush, He sensed memories. Dragons screaming across a sky of ash. Spears shattering. The doom ripping Valeria to splinters. All trapped in stone, echoing still. He did not banish them. He bled off their strength, diffused the frequency, let it flutter harmless as dust motes in moonlight. The hum subsided. Aerys, above, gasped. Bran jolted upward, riding the roots of the castle. The king staggered from his chair, pressing fists to his temples. Parchments scattered like startled birds. Aerys turned. First right, then left, blinking as though new light filled the chamber. His lips parted, a tremulous laugh escaped, so fragile Bran feared breath would break it. Then tears overflowed his lashes. Silence stretched long enough Bran worried the vessel might fail from sudden stillness. Yet Aerys straightened, shoulders relaxing, and looked to the doorway. "Rhaella," he called. No tremor. No hiss. Just a man's call for his wife. Bran's heart, wherever it resided, thudded. Soft steps approached. Rhaella entered, robes silver white. She paused, startled by the mess. Aerys took one step toward her, another, as though waiting against disbelief. He raised one trembling hand. Rhaella's gaze flicked to his nails, so often ragged, but now, in this moment, seeming ordinary. She let him brush her cheek. "I heard them." Aerys' voice cracked. "But they are gone." Rhaella did not understand, yet she smiled, tears mirroring his. She guided him to sit, called softly for servants, though love colored her commands. Bran retreated like smoke under a door, conscience laced with wonder and dread. For what had ended might yet resume, unless he wove the world into a new pattern. He must watch, must return, countless times if need be, to ensure the hum never flared anew. And each visit risked tangling deeper the threads that bound past to present. He surfaced in Winterfell's godswood, breathing like a drowning boy. Summer's muzzle pushed into his chest. Bran wrapped both arms around the direwolf's neck. A caw breached the quiet. A raven cocked its head from a branch above, 3 eyes gleaming black. Not all watchers were friendly. Bran released the wolf and straightened. "Tell me what price," he whispered to the bird. Its third eye glinted, slick with night. Then the raven flew, wings shuffling snow from the bow. 3 days passed, and no king arrived at Winterfell's gate to announce that time had bent and worlds remade. Jon drilled with the guard. Arya's letter spoke of distant roads. Sansa's seals carried news of grain shipments upriver. The realm breathed its accustomed pain and hope. Unaware a seed had been grafted onto an old trunk far away. Bran walked the ramparts at dusk, summer loping ahead. In the west, the sun bled behind clouds like dying embers. He paused where the stones bore Hodor's scuff marks. A raven landed beside him, beak clicking. But this one bore only 2 eyes and a curious tilt of the head. Bran offered it crumbs from his pocket. The bird pecked, satisfied, then launched off toward the north. He closed his eyes, intending a gentle reach, no deeper than a whisper. But the network answered with force. A memory knot is flooded in. The Red Keep's throne room, dawn light stroking banners, and Aerys seated not on the Iron Throne but upon a cushioned chair to its side. He conversed quietly with a tall man, Tywin Lannister. Tywin's face was unreadable iron. Yet the tension Bran recalled from Maester accounts was missing. Here the two spoke like men who had once been friends and might be again, if careful. Aerys' tone was courteous, at times even warm. Madness quieted. Bran retreated, heart hammering. A creak sounded behind. Brienne of Tarth approached, sword at hip. "Your Grace," she greeted, not Bran's title, but Jon's, yet she used it seldom, and never carelessly. It meant she doubted his shouldering of solitude. "I'm myself," Bran said before she asked. She nodded, gaze sweeping the horizon. "Storm coming. Good to have walls rebuilt." Bran followed her stare. Clouds bruised the north. He wondered how many storms lay unseen in the past, ready to roll east if he misstepped. Yet some part of him glowed, fragile as new flame. Remembering Aerys' tears, he slept little that night. Dreams churned in uneasy shallows, half memories of dragons screaming in green fire, of queens singing lullabies, of roots choking crystal caves. Before the dawn he woke, sweat-drenched, though the keep held chill. At first light he sought Jon in the yard, but his brother had ridden with a scouting party. Bran turned to the rookery and penned a message on crisp parchment. To Samuel Tarly in Old Town. Myths of stone-bound spirits, historical accounts of sudden recoveries from delusions among Targaryen rulers, any record of Valyrian bloodlines intertwined with northern magics. He sealed it with dark wax, stamping the direwolf into the pool. The raven flapped into pale sky, black wings raking dawn. Then Bran limped to the godswood again. He would not enter Aerys' mine this day. He dared not press so soon. But he would watch the hum, test its edges, learn the lay of tunnels beneath the throne. He knelt, breathed of resin and cold earth, and let his sight fall. This time, he floated above the Red Keep, gull high. The early sun brushed terracotta roofs. No wildfire shimmered, no specters humstrummed the air. He drifted lower, passing walls decorated with dragon gargoyles casting long shadows. In a garden Rhaegar practiced with his harp. Unaware his father watched unseen from a colonnade, pride softening the sharp line of his mouth. Bran followed that line, reading a mind no longer ragged. Aerys planned a tourney at Harrenhal, but not as trap, for show, for the realm's delight. Threads shifted. Lyanna Stark would still be there. Rhaegar would still sing, but perhaps the tragic note might strike different chord. Bran hovered near a weirnet root coiled through stone. He prodded its memory and felt flexibility. The past had not ossified yet, it breathed. With careful weaving he might maintain this new melody, keep the dragon ghosts quelled. A sudden shriek tore the vision. He jolted. The shriek came from Winterfell. Summer's yelp of pain. He snapped awake. The direwolf lay stiff at the roots, eyes wide, foam flecking his jaws. Bran's pulse crashed like surf. He hurled himself forward, hands on the wolf's great chest. A thin shadow detached from the heart tree. A raven, three-eyed, wings outstretched. It beat upward, scattering snow. Summer convulsed again. Bran thrust his mind outward, pouring calm, but the wolf's bond bucked wild, flayed by unseen claws. He felt a foreign presence. Sharp, cold, older than ice. Not the wildfire hum. Something north of death. He remembered the Night King's hand closing around Hodor's wrist in the cave. A mark. Had he been marked anew when he wove the hum? Had ancient ice sensed the shift, seeking to mend the wound by carving another? Summer thrashed once more, then lay still. No, Bran breathed. He buried his face in red-brown fur, sobbing. The wolf's heartbeats faded like distant drums. At last, they ceased. The weirwood rustled overhead, branches moaning. Bran lifted his head, face streaked with tears. He glared at the raven circling above. "You take, and you take," he hissed. "Is there no gift without cost?" The raven landed on a low limb. It cocked its head, then spoke with a voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "One life for thousands," it croaked. Bran's fists clenched. "Not this life." The bird's three eyes blinked in slow succession. "You would unmake doom. The river of time demands toll." Bran stood, swaying. "If time be a river, I will dam it with my bones before I let it drown those I love." He knelt again beside Summer, stroking the wolf's muzzle. "Price or no, I will not abandon what I have begun." The raven lifted, circled thrice, and vanished beyond the pines. Bran closed the wolf's eyes, then leaned back against the heart tree, eyes burning but tears spent. He felt hollow, a cup emptied. Yet into that hollow memory settled Aerys' voice, newly clear, calling for Aella. One life for thousands. In grief, Bran found grim resolve. He would weave the Song of Stone again, bind its shards so tight, no ice or fire could tear them loose. Summer's sacrifice would echo through every courtyard his ghost would haunt. He rested there until torchlight flickered at the edge of the wood. Men came to bear the direwolf's body. Bran watched, silent, as they carried his last true companion away. Snow fell thicker, muffling each footstep. Soon even the trail of bloodless prints would vanish. But Bran Stark, Greenseer and Cripple, would remember. His wolf's scent clung to every breath he drew. It would guide him through the labyrinth of years, through heat and shadow, until the hum beneath Dragonstone walls lay forever stilled, and the Mad King's madness remained only a whisper, faint and fading, in the farthest corners of untraveled time. Snow kept its vigil over Winterfell for 3 days and 3 nights before the sky, exhausted, bled out the last of its heavy clouds. In that hush, the castle seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something unnamed to shatter the fragile peace. By the 4th dawn, light seeped through pale vapor and turned the ice-slick stones the color of pewter. The world continued as it always did, indifferent to who had been taken and who remained behind. Bran rose from a restless sleep in the solar once his father's. He had not allowed servants to remove summer's bedding or the cracked wooden bowl where the direwolf's water had frozen in a thin skin of white. The room smelled of wolf and cold ashes. Every breath dredged loneliness from his ribs. He dressed in silence, a quilted jerkin, woolen leggings, Hodor's old belt cut down to fit his thinner waist. His legs served him only with iron braces and crutches carved from heartwood, but he strapped them on with methodical care. Pain reminded him he was still bound to a body, a tether he dared not sever. When he emerged into the corridor, he found Podrick Payne waiting, cheeks ruddy from standing in the draft. The young knight's earnest gaze flicked toward Bran's face, then away, as if unsure whether to offer condolences for a wolf. "They're ready," Podrick said. His voice cracked on the first word. He swallowed and tried again. "They're ready in the Godswood, your Bran." He never quite knew what to call the boy in the chair. Bran nodded and began the slow progress down the hall. Podrick offered an arm, which Bran accepted for speed rather than need. They passed arched windows dusted white, the light outside pearl pale. Below, raw earth marked where a grave had been dug at the base of the oldest elm inside the walls. Summer would rest there, among roots that drank snowmelt and memory alike. Jon met them by the door that opened onto the yard. Fur cloaks hung heavy on his shoulders. Frost glittered in the short beard he had begun to keep. When Bran's wheels rattled over the threshold, Jon laid a hand atop one wooden spoke, steadying. "Thank you for coming," Bran murmured. His throat rasped like parchment. Jon did not answer with words. He guided the chair toward the narrow gate of the Godswood, where torchbearers waited, flames snapping in the faint breeze. Brienne stood among them, helm under one arm. Near her, the maester cradled a silver censer wrought like twin wolves twining. Rangers home from the eastern woods kept respectful distance, heads bowed. Summer lay on a bier of spruce branches. Fresh pine needles scented the air, masking the sharper tang of death. Bran reached out, brushing stiff fur that no longer held warmth. His mind remembered the wolf's heartbeat, thunder rolling against his own. He drew a breath, as if hoping the chest might rise in answer. The priest of the old gods, an aging man from the hill clans, intoned a prayer that was more mutter than chant, invoking nameless spirits of bark and brook. No one else spoke. Instead they set torches to the bier. Dry spruce crackled, flames licking gold along resin-rich wood. The wind turned, carrying smoke across Bran's face. He closed his eyes, and for a blink, the smoke smelled like wet fur after a long run under moonlight. When the fire burned low, Jon took Bran's shoulder. "We can wait to cover him if—" "Do it now," Bran said. He wanted completion, a seal on grief so he might work. Men shoveled earth, each heavy scoop thudding soft atop the smoldering remains until the mound rose smooth and round. Bran asked for a single stone marker, nothing ornate. The flat river rock from the Crannogman cairns Mira once showed him. Podrick fetched one from a pile saved for wall repairs. Bran traced on it with charcoal, his letters dark against gray. Here reposed Summer, who guarded the last Greenseer. He set the stone. Earth accepted the weight with a sigh. When all but Jon had drifted away, Bran rested his palms on the cool marker. "I must go back soon," he whispered. Jon's brow knit. "What? Even after this? Because of this?" Bran's gaze stayed fixed on the mound. "You saw him at council yesterday?" Sir Davos ravens tell of whispers in King's Landing. Aerys recalling exiled lords, granting pardons, freeing hostages. The realm stirs. If the past bends too quick, our present may crack. He finally looked at Jon. And if I falter, Summer died for nothing. Jon crouched so their eyes met level. You will not falter, but promise me you won't walk alone again. Bran's smile was thin. No one can follow where I go. Then anchor yourself to something here. Jon touched Bran's forearm above the linen cuff. Sansa. Whoever. Name it before you or let it pull you back. Bran considered. Your voice then. You sang to Arya once when she broke her arm climbing the belfry. It soothed her shattered bone in ways the maester couldn't. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling the tune, half forgotten. I will hold that sound. Jon's cheeks flushed with embarrassed discomfort, but he nodded. If singing is what brings you home, I'll sing every rotten song the free folk taught me. The next night, Bran wheeled himself back to the Godswood. Brienne offered to lift him over roots, but he bade her remain outside the gate. He carried no lantern. The snow had crusted under a refreezing sky. Starlight, cold and bright, cast the heart tree in silver bones. He set the brake on the wheels, settled into a shallow breath, and laid his palms on the bark. The weirwood accepted his touch with a prickle, sap rising like blood quickening. Bran's awareness slid inward, threading the dark tunnels of root and river, racing along memory latitudes until heat flushed against his senses again. But he did not seek the Red Keep at once. First he scouted the white north where the ice presence had struck summer. Through the eyes of wind-swept pines, he felt old cold shifting, restless. A glacier's groan, distant but moving. Whatever dwelt there had tasted the break in time and prowled now for weakness. Bran skirted it, weaving tendrils of watchfulness through the snows like tripwires. Then, bracing his resolve, he turned south. King's Landing shimmered beneath a late spring dawn as he slipped through walls. Aerys slept still in his bedchamber. Rhaella watched him from a chair where she had dozed. A book of floral illuminations open on her lap. Rhaegar's harp drifted faint from a distant gallery. Soft notes coaxing the castle awake. The hum Bran feared was absent, replaced by a silence that felt like a lake before storm clouds. Bran dipped deeper, testing the wildfire vault. No resonance. Instead, a new ward pulsed. Soft, green, woven of willow and water. Somewhere, the children of the forest had felt his work and lent their own. He almost wept with gratitude. Ascending, he hovered before a window slit and stared east, across Blackwater Bay where morning light danced. This path looked stable. Yet the White Walkers grew aware. Bran sensed them gnawing at the edges, determined to pry open a crack. He must ensure the South would be ready when the North called, else his victory here would doom his own land. A chill gust swept the corridor. Though the arrow slits were shuttered, Bran's awareness whipped round. In a shadowed alcove, half hidden behind a tapestry of Aegon atop Balerion, stood a figure in fur-lined black cloak. Tall, thin, face shrouded by a hood. But Bran knew the chill of that presence. The pale king of ice stepping through dream into the Red Keep. Impossible. The Night King belonged to far north legends, yet here his essence intruded on a place of dragons, drawn by Bran's meddling. A silent war of realms. The Night King reached out, touching the stone as if testing a new world's heat. Frost spidered across the flagstones, whitening mortar lines. Where it spread, Bran felt time crystallize. Years locking rigid, unable to shift. If that frost reached Aerys, all would freeze back into madness or worse. Bran gathered the threads of the weirwood like reins. He willed heat, life. Every memory of summer chasing deer through snowfields, howling at moon. The warmth flooded corridors, forcing frost to recede in rivulets. The Night King turned his hooded gaze toward the disembodied Greenseer. Twin bursts of cerulean flame flared beneath the hood. Eyes ancient and pitiless. He reached again. Bran answered with roots. From gaps in stone, thorns of ghostly weirwood sprouted, cracking limestone, wrapping the Night King's wrist. The Ice Lord wrenched back, stone shrieked. Frost billowed, shearing roots into shards. Yet each root severed revealed 5 more weaving upward, encircling him. They grappled in silence, a contest of will. Bran's mind strained. Blood drummed in his ears, though he had no tangible heart here. He anchored himself to Jon's song. Soft, distant, but there. The last of the giants, sung low in a northern accent. "I am the last," she sang. "I am the last." Bran poured the haunting melody through the roots. The refrain twined into living wood, giving it shape, purpose. The Night King's frost steamed against that music, hissing, and for a moment, the opposing forces pulsed in stalemate. Then the ice cloak ripped free, leaving only shattered branches that writhed and crumbled. The Night King vanished, withdrawn back to his realm or to some way station between. The corridor breathed again. Bran felt the ward crackling, but it still held. However, he knew this was warning, not defeat. The next assault would fall not in dream but flesh, when the walkers marched south in undeniable armies. He must nudge the realm to unity sooner than any prior timeline. A healed Aerys might become the key. Bran soared to the king's bedchamber. As the first bells tolled prime, Aerys stirred. Rhaella set aside her book, brushed silver hair from her husband's brow. Aerys smiled, fragile but genuine, then ordered sweet wine and bread to be taken to the small folk, waiting petition in the outer ward. Generosity. The broken man remembered kindness. Bran slipped into his mind, not fully, merely brushing thought the way one tests water with toes. He tasted fear and hope mingled. The memory of whispers now gone. He left behind an image, a wall of black ice beneath green auroras, pale shapes moving beyond. Aerys shivered, understanding winter's true threat as Bran intended. When Bran withdrew into the godswood, his own body jerked. He gasped. Air stung lungs as if he'd walked barefoot in sleet. Brienne's gauntleted hand caught his shoulder just before he toppled. "Your anchor worked?" she asked. "Jon singing?" "Yes." He found his voice hoarse. "I heard it. He isn't even here." He half laughed at wonder. "Tell him never to mock his voice again." Brienne's mouth curved in ghost smile. "I'll remind him." As she guided the chair back toward the keep, Bran scanned rampart shadows for ravens with too many eyes. None watched. Yet he felt certain the Weirnet murmured tonight not with ghosts, but with countless living voices. Children at hearths, smiths at forges, lords and small folk, all whose fates turned on the hinge of a moment he had remade. He prayed to every nameless god that hinge would not snap. Weeks passed. Spring sidled into the north like a timid guest. Snowmelt fed rivers swollen and loud. Word arrived on raven wings thick as summer swarms. The king's tourney at Harrenhal rescheduled. Rhaegar petitioning for renewed alliances with the North and Vale. A royal decree promising men and grain to reinforce the night's watch. Jon read each parchment beside Bran at the library's long table. "He believes the threat," Jon mused, voice edged with awe. Bran fingered the wax seal, bearing 3-headed dragon. "Belief is the kindling. Now we must light it." Sansa replied days later from the Eyrie, startled but cautiously hopeful. She wrote of Lord Robert Arryn's health gaining under Maester Coleman's regimen, and of whisperers who insisted the king had grown well. She did not trust transformation born overnight. Bran could hardly blame her. On the 15th day of the 4th moon, a royal raven beat weary wings to Winterfell's rookery. The king summoned the Stark in Winterfell to attend Harrenhal, to stand witness at a council of reunification, his word. Jon laid the scroll before Bran. "Will you go?" Bran flexed fingers numbed by cold, despite spring. "I must remain here for the tree, but you can go in my stead, as the king must face the wolf he once feared most." "Nadine sa." Jon snorted softly. "He never feared me." "No," Bran agreed, "but he should." They shared a look, both recalling lessons of power. Kindness from Aerys now did not erase wildfire once hoarded. Preparations began. Knights' polished armor dulled by salt and slush. Garrons stamped in the stables, manes brushed gleaming. Brienne and Podrick joined the company. Davos arrived from White Harbor with longships bearing dried cod in tar barrels. On the eve before departure, Bran returned to the Godswood for one last vigil. The air smelled of thawed loam, heart tree blossoms staining snow with crimson petals. He placed both palms against bark and whispered, "I cage the past not for glory but for dawn. Guide those who ride tomorrow." The tree did not answer in words, but beneath Bran's fingertips a low vibration thrummed, the pulse of summer, reborn inside sleeping roots. He swore he felt summer's presence curled there, guarding him still. Tears blurred the carved face until red eyes appeared to weep with him. Behind, footsteps crunched. It was Arya, arrived just before the march. Her hair was shorn to nape, her eyes bluer than the north sky. She said nothing, only slid to sit cross-legged beside him. They stayed until stars wheeled overhead and the castle horns called the Hour of Ghosts. When Bran finally turned back to the keep, the wind shifted, carrying a faint far-off melody. Jon singing as he walked the battlements, practicing for the day Bran might need a voice to find his way home again. Dawn bled pale gold when the hosts set out. Standard-bearers lifted the dire wolf and crowned stag. House Baratheon had pledged 300 men under Lord Renford for the journey. A swirl of banners caught the sunrise, sigils glowing like stained glass. Jon rode at the fore, astride a black destrier, Ghost pacing silent as breath beside the hooves. Bran watched from the eastern tower's highest arch until the column wound into white haze and vanished beyond the King's Road. Silence snapped back, starker for their absence. Winterfell felt again like an old man's bones clicking in empty sleeves. He could not remain idle. He summoned maesters, scribes, builders. Walls must be heightened, granaries stocked, raven lofts expanded. South might parley, but North prepared for war. He wrote too. Letters to Daenerys across the narrow sea, rumored to survive with 3 infant dragons in exile, warning that her father lived sane and sought her safety. To the Iron Bank of Braavos, offering future trade in timber for iron-tipped spears. To the Citadel, requesting treatises on other. Ink stained his fingers night after night. Between sessions he slipped into the tree, patrolling memory for cracks. Sometimes he found Aerys dreaming of soft grass, a younger Rhaegar, showing him a new chord on the harp. Sometimes he glimpsed the Night King prowling gray wastes, gathering tens of thousands of silent dead beneath flickering lights. The Ice Lord carried now a weirwood branch blackened by frost, a trophy from their clash. Each vision left Bran trembling. Yet the ward held. Until one evening midsummer, ravens erupted from the tower in a storm of black wings. A courier burst breathless into the great hall. Scroll in trembling hand, words choked out. Tourney of Harrenhal. Broken. Kingsguard slain. Dragon banners in flight. Bran wheeled forward, snatching the parchment. Ink ran where sweat had blurred it, but the lines told a tale none could misread. The Night King's mark had found a vessel in the south after all. One who bore old dragon blood and new dragon flame. Within an hour, Bran ordered every bell rung, summoning lords, small folk, smiths. No more caging echoes. War had leapt the bones of time, wearing a mask none expected. And in the hush before the alarm truly spread, Bran whispered to the silent heavens, "Summer, guide my brother now." Far north, a cold star fell, trailing emerald fire across the black. Gay, Cal. The raven's feet were still caked with blood when it toppled from Bran's wrist onto the map table. Its heart had failed between the battlements and the hall, spent by the frenzy that had driven it across half a realm without pause. Bran brushed a thumb over the matted feathers, reading the message beneath the gore with his skin and his sight both. He felt the echo of every half-formed word. The tourney of Harrenhal broken before the third tilt, white winds screaming across the god's eye, and a dragon seen soaring on midnight wings rhymed with ice, trailing a tail of green fire like a wound torn through the sky. Before the scroll could unroll among the candles, Lord Glover snatched it up, mouth set in grim line, but Bran already knew every stroke of ink. Cuin, the master of ravens, had pressed his quill so hard the parchment split in places. His fear seeped through even where the words fell away. "Jon, where are you?" Bran closed his eyes and reached, burst outward, skimming the thin threads that wove through every living creature. then deeper, diving the black wells of time and bark. His brother's name was a beacon, muffled now by distance, and by a storm of magic thrashing southward like a river reversed. Yet there, beneath layers of pain and battle din, Jon Snow's heart still beat, steady as a smith's hammer. The relief did not dull Bran's terror. It sharpened it. A living brother meant a brother still in peril. He turned to the gathered lords. Glover, Manderley's nephew Sir Torrin, Lady Barbary of the Rills, each bearing news too raw to temper. None had spoken since the bells rang, save with worried glances. Bran's crutches thudded once as he planted them beside the table. "We close the approach roads," he said, voice rough from disuse. "Every village between the last river and the neck draws behind stockades. We double the watches on every hearth and rampart. The Night King has reached beyond the wall before. He will do so again through whatever rift has opened at Harrenhal. Stay." Lord Glover ran a calloused hand down his beard. "We have not the men to bar every trail." Bran's gaze rested on him, and for an instant the Lord thought he saw wolfish amber in the boy's eyes. "Then we bar the ones the dead are likeliest to walk. They remember old ways. They follow water. They heed the bones of long roads. Post torches on stone mile markers, burn them bright day and night. The dead shy from flame until commanded. Make them break that instinct." "Day." Lady Barbary lifted her gaze from her gauntleted hands. "And if the command comes from the Night King himself, we'd spend oil faster than we can haul it." "Perhaps." Bran leaned heavily on the crutches, shoulders bowed. "But each night they pause is another day for the southern armies to rally. Time is worth the price." Sir Torrin Manderley blew out a breath. "If there are southern armies left to rally. The Raven speaks of dragon and ice both. That is war none have trained for. Then you rhino. Men can be trained." Bran angled his head toward the hearth where a map of Westeros, burned onto wooden plates by a craftsman's iron, lay spread wide. "If we cannot outnumber, we will outknow. The walkers have weaknesses. Dragon glass, Valyrian steel, true fire. We have stores of dragon glass from Skagos still unshipped. We have Smith Quellen's new forge for steel folding. And we have fire. King Aerys's wildfire caches, or what remains, can be ours if I can keep his mind clear long enough." "Nin." At the mention of wildfire, the hall murmured unease. Half those present had lost kin in the fires of near wars. Bran's gaze settled on the silent flame of a single taper. "Fear will not stop us. Only ignorance does that. We act." He dismissed council, assigning riders to each command. They plunged into snow-flecked night, cloaks snapping in wind that smelled of granite and thaw. Bran lingered until torches dwindled from view. Shout. The hall emptied save for Podrick, who stood by the door as if rooted there. "Say it," Bran murmured without turning. Podrick cleared his throat. "I wanted to ride with them. But Sir Brienne said I must stay near you." "I would keep you here as well," Bran said. "But not for my sake. When Jon returns, I'll need a knight I trust to stand ready with his banner. Until then, I need a man who remembers every song he ever heard." Podrick blinked. "Songs? Songs anchor. You will see." "No, Wadi." Night gripped Harrenhal like a strangler's hands. When Jon Snow drew his sword free of a corpse, whose armor still smoked where ghostly fire had licked it clean. The air reeked of lake water gone brackish, of charred flesh, of something older. Iron bled from the very walls. Cinders snowed from the broken vaults high above the hall of 100 hearths. The tourney grounds outside throbbed with scattered cries, but here the only sound left was rattling armor settling upon stone. Beside Jon knelt Brienne, visor dented, blood dripping from a rent in her brigandine. She did not yet seem to know she bled. Ghost prowled the shadows, hackles high, crimson eyes tracking every ember that drifted. Lord Davos staggered from behind an overturned table, clutching a flaming brand. "Dragon," Davos croaked, eyes too wide. "Was that Rhaegar?" Jon dragged in a breath that tasted of frost, though the hall blazed in places. "Not Rhaegar." He wiped Longclaw on the cloak of a dead knight. The body wore the white of the Kingsguard, but its breastplate bore a jagged wound, edged with frost. He wore no helm. His eyes, blue as winter, Brienne finished. Voice hollow. Jon's gaze rose toward the shattered clerestory windows. Moments earlier the vaulted roof had rung with cheers as the king, his queen, and half the realm's great lords watched the final joust. Then the sky had split. An unearthly shriek. A shape like a dragon wrought of black iron and night storm. It descended trailing a spiral of emerald flame. Wind driven by its vast wings, had snuffed torches, toppled pavilions, hurled banners across the lists. And walking in its wake strode a line of pale warriors armored in ice, dead men bound to wheel stronger than their decay. At their head, a figure clad in dark mail trimmed with silver scales, his hair a wild drift of snow, his eyes two burning points of sapphire. When Jon beheld him, he had known the truth Bran had hinted in letters. The Night King sought not merely to overrun the wall. He sought the blood of dragons to wet ice and fire both. Above them Aerys had cried from the royal balcony, first in terror, then inexplicably in command. "Stand fast," he'd shouted, and flame had erupted from unseen nozzles along the walls, a wildfire defense he had planned for years. Yet the flame burned green no more. Where it struck the ice warriors it dimmed, drawing inward, feeding the dragon in the sky, wreathing it in emerald-rimmed shadow. The madness Bran thought cured had not returned. Rather, the king had tried to protect his guests. But his secrecy had forged his undoing. The Night King's beast drank wildfire as if it were a river of oil. Jon forced the memory aside. Survival first, then vengeance. He hauled Davos upright. "We need to reach the lake. Boats may still float." "And the king?" Brienne asked. "If he lives, he'll be at the God's Eye too." Jon sheathed Longclaw. "Ghost will find the scent." They navigated corridors choking smoke and dust, avoiding places where rubble glowed red hot. Outside, the tourney field lay a charnel mosaic of broken lances and pulverized tents. Nobles trampled beneath stampedes of panicked horses. Rhaella's ladies had fled toward the woods. Some now knelt amid reeds, moaning prayers. Servants staggered with burns that bled light, the wildfire's eerie afterglow. No sign remained of the dragon, save a scorched trench, gouge across the lists and vanishing northward, as though the beast had raked claws through soil before taking flight. Brienne pointed. "Tracks lead to the lake." Jon signaled Ghost ahead. The direwolf bounded, white fur flickering green where embers glimmered. They followed among survivors, trickling the same direction. A hush like snow descended upon the company despite the crackle of lingering fires. No one spoke the dread forming behind their eyes. The Night King had cut a hole through the universe of expected war. At the lakeshore, where weeping willows dipped scorched branches, they found the king's guards. Alive, circled round Aerys and Rhaella, and young Viserys, no more than a toddler. Rhaegar knelt beside his parents, harp discarded among rushes. Blood streaked his cheek, but he held no wound. His gaze lifted as Jon approached, relief blooming even amid horror. "Lord Snow," Rhaegar greeted. What had been formal courtesy at breakfast sounded now like quiet gratitude. "Your warning letters may not have come, but your blade did." Jon shook his head. "We held 3 ranks of tents away. Too little." "My men fought fierce," Queen Rhaella said. She clutched Viserys to breast. "The singers will remember even if we do not live to sing." Jon's eyes sought Aerys. The king knelt on one knee, hands caked in soot. His eyes, once wild or weary, shone clear, almost luminous with resolve. He met Jon's stare without treachery. "My wildfire," Aerys whispered. "All of that power stolen. I thought it shield. It fed the enemy." Jon crouched to meet him. "Your Grace, we flee now. The ice dragon has flown north. We beat it to the wall and stand together there." "Nah." The king's gaze darted east, where dawn cracked the horizon with pallid light. "North, yes. All north now." Boats lay moored, pleasure barges for the tourney crowds. Men slashed ropes, shoved hulls into water, lapping black glass calm. The survivors crammed aboard. Knights shoulder to shoulder with small folk. Distinctions drowned in urgency. Jon's company took the last vessel, a wide-bottomed skiff once meant for rowers in bright livery. Ghost leapt aboard last as oars dug into dark water. Behind, Harrenhal smoldered, its towers bleeding smoke. Above those ruins thundered a distant roar. The dragon circling, triumphant. Yet as Jon watched its silhouette pass before the moon, he saw cracks of light within its wings where veins of green fire pulsed. Fire and ice both, bound savage. He turned toward the bow, fix on north. Well, and. Bran watched through a rook's eyes far overhead as the flotilla crawled the shimmering surface of the god's eye like beetles on obsidian plate. He hovered near, every feather bristling with tension not his own. When the boats reached the far shore, the rook swooped lower, landing on the helm of a fallen soldier. Through its small black orbs, Bran looked upon the survivors. The king's cloak shredded, Jon steady as oak at his side, Brienne lifting visories onto the bank, Davos turning to help a stumbling archer. Bran tried to speak, to give warning of the ice dragon's vantage, but his voice could only caw, useless. Yet Jon's head snapped up. He saw the rook, recognized something in its posture perhaps. He touched his chest in silent salute. Bran felt the connection thread taut between them, strong enough to ferry thought without sound. Hold fast along the trident, Bran sent. March, swift. I will hinder pursuit. Jon's brow furrowed. Then he nodded. Without revealing to companions, he traced fingers to his temple. I hear. The troops began to move. Bran released the rook and returned to his body with a wrench that set muscles trembling. Podrick steadied him upon awakening. It worked? Podrick asked, voice raw. Yes. Bran wiped sweat from his eyelids, though the hall was cold. But not enough. We need stronger wards. Dah. He ordered the blacksmiths roused though it was deep night. They stoked the new forges, engraving dragonglass shards into arrowheads and spear tips. Bran rolled plans across long tables, rotating beacon pyres along the wall. Chain-run flame-throwers fueled by tallow and pitch, repeating ballistae spitting iron shafts, tipped with steel as fine as ice once was. One obstacle loomed: wildfire. Only King's Landing held stores enough to ignite trenches across a continent. If the ice dragon absorbed flame, wildfire might empower it further. Bran considered, hand hovering over the inkpot, then penned a letter to Qyburn, former master of whisperers rumored alive somewhere in the Crownlands. Your knowledge of alchemy's unsafe may now save every living soul. Come north under banner of truce. We barter secrets for survival. He sealed the scroll with gray wax and the dire wolf. If Qyburn lived, he would come. Curiosity always trumped fear in men who trafficked with death. And shall it? 3 days and nights Jon's column traveled, slipping between torched villages, crossing fords half flooded by sudden thaws. At each mile they gathered stragglers, Tyrell knights whose warhorse coats smoked still, small folk bearing babes swaddled in burnt quilts, a silent company of Dothraki, who had come as free riders to see tournament wonders, and now rode behind Rhaegar, with black braids trailing ash. On the fourth dusk the air turned colder without wind. Torches flicked blue at their tips. Jon knew the sign too well. He ordered halt in a ruined barn and set archers on the roof, though arrows did little against steel cages of ice. Sometime past moonrise a roar shook the sky. Clouds parted as the dragon swooped overhead, its scales now sheathing pockets of flickering green. Where stray embers drifted to ground, they hissed against frost, daubing the grass. The beast's howl carried not merely sound but a pressure like grief crushing lungs. Jon's archers loosed, but shafts split to splinters on the creature's hide. Ghost bristled, teeth bared. Rhaegar stepped onto an overturned cart, harp strung across his back replaced now by a longsword of tourney display. Yet he did not lift the blade. Instead he sang, voice rising in high Valyrian, a ballad of sun-forged wings defying winter. It cut through the attempt at fear, weaving a thread of beauty even as the dragon wheeled around. Something in the melody caught the beast. Its roar faltered, changed pitch. Jon felt new resonance tremble in bones. The dragon hovered, vast wings beating a gale, head canting as though listening. In its eyes, a shimmer of conflict, of memory. They were not entirely a white's hollow cavities. Flickers of molten gold swam inside the blue. Aerys pushed through the cluster of men, Rhaella clasping his hand. "Rhaegar, hold the tune," he commanded. Then to Jon, "Give me fire of men, not pyromancer's green devils." Jon understood at once. Torches, pine nuts, pitch. Soldiers thrust spears into brazier flames, rushlights flaring bright orange. They planted in semicircles around the royals, tips blazing like a ringed sun. Rhaegar modulated to a minor key, subtle shifts echoing what Jon had once heard Mira hum to soothe summer. The dragon descended further, crosswinds gusting. Snow dashed across Jon's cheeks though no snow clouds drifted. He met those eyes, ice and fire swirling, and glimpsed sorrow. The beast opened its jaws, bitter vapors spilled, yet it did not exhale full breath. Instead, a warbling croak rumbled, almost like a note struggling to join Rhaegar's song. Behind the dragon, high in the night, the silhouette of the Night King emerged, riding the spine. He melded with the shadows between stars, seam of darkness sewn into sky. His arms spread like razored wings of his own. He thrust one hand forward. The dragon contorted, pulled taut by unseen reins. The sorrow in its gaze burned away under new command. Blue flared. It inhaled fiercely. Aerys screamed, but not in terror, an utterance of denial shaped like flame. Jon saw sparks leap from the king's spread hands. Orange sparks, not green. The torches surged brighter, flaring into pillars. Rhaegar's voice climbed. Bran's ink warnings proved true. Fire still obeyed dragon blood, if guided by will, unsullied by madness. When the ice dragon loosed its breath, the stream of freezing gloom met a wall of living flame. Clash birthed a storm of hissing steam, scalding shards of ice, entire gusts that spun in cyclones overhead. Men shielded faces as water, fire and frost hammered about them. In that swirling maelstrom, Jon felt the Night King's presence flare with furious intent. Cold claws closed upon their camp, unseen. Bodies froze where they stood. Footfalls crunched where whites advanced under veils of steam. Jon bellowed to archers, "Aim for the shadows walking." Steel kissed silent white shapes. Some shattered, limbs exploding in cold dust. Others kept coming. Ghost leapt into pale forms, smashing skulls to shards. Jon sought the Night King across broken sky. He found him dismounting in air as if walking down invisible steps, descending toward Aerys. When his boots touched earth, frost burst outward in spiderweb cracks. Every torch guttered, fought, then shrank to embers. Rhaegar dropped silent, throat spent. Aerys sagged to knees. Jon stepped forward, long claw alight with residual flame, Valyrian steel keening faint. The Night King's eyes fixed on him. In that gaze, Jon felt every winter his ancestors endured. The famine, the stillbirth cries, the howling emptiness where hearths died. Yet within the void glittered something more. A sliver of envy, almost longing, for the warmth mortals wasted. Jon lunged. Steel met frost gauntlet. Shards skittered. The Night King did not flinch. He grasped Longclaw's blade bare-handed, ice enveloping metal. Cracks spidered across the dark steel but did not break. Instead, frost retreated, sizzling. The sword glowed amber where ghostly flame from the torches lingered. Jon wrenched free, pivoted, slashed for the Night King's back. The ancient being flowed sideways impossible fast, leaving a trail of rime. His hand swept upward. Shards of ice formed a spear midair. He hurled. Jon barely raised blade to block. Impact flung him across packed earth. Breath left him. Ghost snarled, launching. Fang met gauntlet. The Night King flung the direwolf with lazy force. Coast skidded, whimpering, but rose again. Brienne charged, greatsword raised. Ice spear intercepted, fracturing on contact but sending her staggering. Davos pulled her aside as another wight lunged. In the chaos, Rhaella whispered to Viserys a lullaby. The child, bewildered, pressed tear-wet cheek to her shoulder. Aerys rose, fury beating in his chest. Sparks crackled at his fingertips again. Jon, forced to knees, ears ringing, realized the king's rage channeled heat itself. But uncontrolled, it might feed the dragon anew. Jon slid across mud toward Aerys and clasped the king's sleeve. "Steady," Jon managed. "Aim at the Night King, not his beast." Aerys's eyes gleamed like polished rubies, yet they held clarity. He nodded, then thrust both hands outward. Pure orange fire roared from his palms, funneled by some sorcerous current. The jet struck the Night King square, surrounding him in a pillar of living inferno. Steam erupted, ground hissed. But within that blaze, a silhouette stood unconsumed. Frost-billowing cloak. The Night King's armor glowed red, then pale again as cold devoured heat. He stepped forward, fire parting like curtains. Aerys staggered, strength spent. Jon saw only one chance. He whistled, a piercing note Bran had once used for summer. Ghost responded, bolting around to flank. Jon darted opposite, Longclaw raised two-handed. Brienne joined, sword gleaming coral in light. They engaged in triple assault. Steel, fang, fury. Valyrian edge sheared shards from the Night King's mail. Brienne's blade, castle forged but blessed in sept balm, rang sparks. Ghost tore into an armored thigh, ripping chips of frozen flesh that melted to water. The Night King parried each with supernal grace, yet his back foot slid. Perhaps Aerys's fire had cracked his plating. Jon pressed harder, blow following blow, until one thrust pierced underarm. Cold spurted like mist. The ancient entity recoiled. In that heartbeat, the ice dragon screamed overhead, sensing its master's peril. It banked sharply toward the battle, but above stacked clouds, an answering roar erupted. One born of true flame. From south hurtled another shape, smaller, copper-scarlet scales catching dawn. A dragon born not of death but of life. Drogon. Daenerys Stormborn rode his neck, silver hair lashing. Behind, in widening valley, two more dragons gleamed, Arhegel and Viserion. Bran's last letter had crossed the narrow sea. She had flown day and night to answer. Drogon folded wings, diving. He spat a torrent of red gold fire that wrapped the ice dragon's flank. Bonded wildfire flickered defensively, but this fire came laced with dragon magic older than the Night King's forging. Scales cracked, flicking chunks into the wind. The ice dragon's shriek shivered every rib on the field. On the ground, Jon felt an opening. He drove Longclaw deeper, twisting. Cold steam roared around his wrists. Beside him, Brienne hacked the spear arm free at elbow. Ghost leapt upward, jaws closing on exposed throat. Blue blaze dimmed in the Night King's eyes. But still, he fought. He seized Ghost by scruff with bleeding stump, hurling Wolf aside. He reached for Jon's face, fingers like icicle daggers. Jon braced, but Aerys stepped in, placing his body between. "No more children of mine," the king whispered, and unleashed fire from within his chest. It erupted from mouth and eyes, an incandescent geyser that enveloped king and Night King together. Jon cried out. The blast hurled him backward. Heat seared hair, yet a sudden downdraft of snow quenched ignition before it reached others. When he rose, blinking tears, only molten puddles of metal marked where both kings had stood. Steam spiraled upward, carrying the smell of lightning-struck stone. Brienne helped Jon to feet again. They stared skyward. Drogon and siblings harried the ice dragon, tearing at wings, gouting flame. The night-forged beast twisted desperately, frost breath sputtering. With each wound the green wildfire within spilled, and Daenerys dragons devoured it like kindling, their own fire blazing hotter. At last Drogon latched jaws onto the ice dragon's neck, Rhaegal and Viserion each seizing a wing joint. They pulled. Sound like glaciers cracking split the world. Neck snapped. The corpse plummeted into the lake, smashing through thin ice, sending up plume of shattered crystal. The living dragons wheeled overhead, trumpeting triumph. Dawn finally broke full, gilding smoke and steam in rosy gold. Jon zagged to knees, exhausted beyond words. Around him men began weeping or laughing, or simply staring at the sky. Ghost limped back, bloody but alive, pressing muzzle to Jon's hair. Queen Rhaella knelt beside molten pool, tears catching light. She whispered the king's name again and again. Rhaegar rested a hand on her shoulder, grief etched deep. Jon turned to Daenerys as she dismounted, boots crunching frost. They studied each other, two strangers bound by fire and snow. She glanced at the puddled remains. "Your king. He saved us," Jon said, "and gave you your throne at the same time." Her eyes, violet as twilight, flicked to the shattered form of the ice dragon steaming in the lake, and burned with the enemy. A tale the realm will struggle to believe. Jon managed a weary smile. "We have dragons to persuade them." A hiss of steam made heads whip round. The lake's dark mirror boiled around the dragon's corpse. From its cavernous chest spilled shards of glassy blue, crystals that pulsed once, twice, then cracked, leaking pale mist. One larger than the rest floated free. A heart of ice and green fire fused, still beating faint. Jon stepped forward. So did Daenerys. Rhaegar barred his mother's path. Brienne blocked Ghost. Only the two who carried within them mingled songs of dragon and wolf dared approach. Frost formed intricate runes across the jewel's surface, ancient words that Bran would have deciphered. But Bran was far away behind walls of Winterfell. Jon reached first. Heat in his palm warred with chill of the crystal. Daenerys laid her hand atop his. Together warmth flooded the gem. Cracks widened. The faint beat slowed, then quieted altogether. The crystal shattered like sugar glass, scattering shards across ice. Where they lay, grass green and tender thrust up despite cold, as though spring asserted sovereignty again. Jon exhaled, steam mixing with early light. For the first time since children's stories by hearth, he felt something like hope. Ancient hate. Far north, Bran collapsed as vision ended, gasping. He had felt king's sacrifice, dragon clash, crystals breaking as if his own skull cracked. Podrick caught him as before, but this time Bran's weight dragged them both to knees. "Is it finished?" Podrick asked. Bran shook head weakly. "One battle." He clutched Podrick's sleeve. "The heart of ice is gone, but shards remain. They will bury into world's cracks if left." Podrick frowned. "What must we do?" Bran steadied breath. "Send riders with dragonglass seed. Plant at every place where shard falls. Let fire trees sprout to drink any poison." He tried to laugh, but coughed instead. "We are gardeners now, not warriors." Podrick helped him to the window. Dawn there mirrored one just breaking over Harrenhal's field, though distance turned its hue faint. Between towers a rook circled, cawing. Bran recognized its song, a melody Rhaegar had sung, echoing across leagues of wind. The realms had chosen harmony over ruin, at least for today. Bran pressed fingers to heart tree's scarlet leaves one last time, before allowing himself, for a heartbeat, to rest. Weeks later, the procession reached the wall. Jon rode at head beside Daenerys, who carried visories on her saddle. Rhaegar traveled on foot among small folk, harp-strung once more. Brienne, Podrick, Davos, and ghostly thousands of northerners lined the ramparts with torches that burned normal fire. Orange, crackling, pure. From tallest tower, Bran watched their arrival, eyes shining with pride and sorrow. Summer's grave lay fresh-tended at his side, sprouting shoots of pale flowers shaped like tiny wolves. He leaned on crutches, stepped forward to greet the queen who called herself Stormborn, the prince who wrote songs on harp strings, the brother whose voice had guided him home, and the shattered world they would mend together. The shards of old magic glimmered still beneath snow and soil, but now many hands would tend the garden. Time itself might yet grow roses in the ruins of ice and fire, if shepherded by those who remembered every cost. Bran lifted a hand to the sky where 3 dragons circled, their shadows crossed like shifting sigils upon the frost-bright stones. Above their wing beats, the wind carried a new chorus. Voices of men and women and children, singing hope into cold air. And beneath their song Bran heard, faint but abiding, summer's distant howl, running forever through the green realms of memory. He smiled, and the world, for the first quiet moment in living memory, dared to breathe as though tomorrow might truly dawn.